It's February 27th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with the South Korean government's back-to-work order for doctors. The government says that doctors must return to their post by this Thursday if they do not want to be held legally accountable for their collective strike action. However, those involved in the protest are showing no willingness to do so. Sweden will now join NATO as the 32nd member after Hungary held a parliamentary vote to approve the move. In response, the Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree re-establishing the Soviet-era Moscow and Leningrad military districts. The World Mobile Congress is back for its 2024 edition, featuring eye-catching gadgets and the newest services. Those include Samsung's Galaxy Ring, Lenovo's fully transparent laptop, and of course, the most up-to-date AI. The government has set this Thursday as the deadline for doctors to get back to work or otherwise be held accountable for their massive walkout. Now, the call applies to over 10,000 doctors who are showing no interest in obeying the order. Shin Ha-young reports.
Amid the spread of collective action against the increase in medical school enrollment quotas, the government has issued a deadline for protesting doctors to return to work.
Considering the seriousness of the situation, the government is making a final plea. If you return to the hospital you left behind by the 29th, you won't be held responsible for what has already happened.
The country's Interior Minister Lee Sang-min has also urged doctors to engage in dialogue with the government for better medical service conditions. Hospitals have been scrambling, relying on attending physicians and professors to step in to fill medical service gaps left by the mass exodus of trainee doctors that began last Tuesday. However, the healthcare crisis is poised to deepen with medical school graduates turning down intern positions. According to the Health Ministry on Monday, as of Friday, over 9,000 trainee doctors from 100 major hospitals, accounting for over 70% of all trainee doctors, have walked off their jobs, and more than 10,000 trainee doctors have submitted resignation letters. The ministry said that trainee doctors who refuse to return to work by the deadline could start facing punishment the following day.
Starting from March, according to principles in the law, it is inevitable to impose a minimum 3-month license suspension for those who do not return to work, and to proceed with related judicial measures.
In the meantime, the Korean Medical Association has called for an immediate halt to the government's expansion plan, warning of legal action. Arguing that the plan would compromise the quality of medical education, the KMA said the entire medical sector would fight using every legal means available until the end. In addition, the KMA is planning a massive rally on Yeouido on March 3rd with 20,000 doctors expected to participate. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Seoul's second Vice Foreign Minister Kang In-sung reminded North Korea that its nuclear and missile programs were an immediate challenge to international community and urged the regime to stop its provocations. In a speech at the UN Conference on Disarmament held in Geneva on Monday, Vice Minister Kang highlighted the North's illicit nuclear and missile programs, which she called the most urgent task for international peace and security. She noted that the regime has launched more than 100 ballistic missiles over the past few years, while pointing out that North Korea is the only country in the 21st century to test its nuclear weapons and shamelessly boast about it. Kang called on the reclusive state to immediately stop provocations, return to dialogue, and give up its nuclear weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missile programs in a fully verifiable and irreversible manner. North Korea reportedly continues to reject foreign aid workers entering the regime, yet it's welcoming back Russian tourists. What's on the North's mind? We turn to Yago Zeslut for more. Welcome back.
Hello, thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks for joining us. So, citing multiple international organizations, NK News reported last week that the North continues to keep its doors closed to foreign aid workers. Isn't pandemic no longer a concern for the North?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that the pandemic is no longer an issue for the government of North Korea, and we can see that because North Korean citizens are now being recalled home for the first time in years, and diplomats from Russia, China, and Mongolia are being welcomed into North Korea without going through a lengthy quarantine process. And of course, there are these Russian ski tourists that I mentioned. So as to when aid workers will go in, yesterday I interviewed a former senior official from the United Nations for the NK News podcast, and I asked him this exact question: when will aid workers and other humanitarian folks be allowed back in? And he said he believes it'll be soon, but he couldn't specify exactly when.
Yeah, like you mentioned, at the same time, Russian tourists are allowed to travel to the regime. I mean, what does this mean then?
Yes, it's a good question, and it's certainly not what we expected, but I think the general consensus is that it's a way of North Korea practicing a favorable diplomacy, a diplomacy of favoritism with those friends and allies that are closest to it. So by letting Russians in, the government of Pyongyang is showing that it is in support of Russia and that it needs friendship and support from Russia in return.
So you're saying North Korea is playing this diplomacy of favoritism. I also would like to point out how North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has a secret son, reportedly, who is kept out of the public eye because he's apparently too pale and thin. This is according to the Daily Mail. Now, how realistic is this statement? What do you think, Yako?
Yeah, well, some context here. So the source for that Daily Mail article is Choi Soo-young, who is the same former NIS official who said back in November last year that everyone has been using the wrong name for Kim Jong-un's daughter and that it's actually not Kim Ju-ae, but Kim Un-ju. Now, that case still has not been proven, and there's been some pushback against that, such that, for example, it doesn't make sense if people in North Korea with the name Ju-ae have been forced to change their name. Why would that name be the wrong one? And other arguments. So, now, of course, it is quite possible that Kim Jong-un has other children, but we haven't seen them. So if they do exist, they're being kept out of the public eye for some reason. And if that boy that Choi Soo-young said exists and is being held because he's too thin and pale, well, look, that might be true, but the media has to be careful of single source reporting. We've got these two stories. They're all based on the same source. I would advise caution, and we have to wait until we get some more sources. For example, if there was a defector who came out from North Korea who had been close to the center of power, who had seen the boy and knew something about it, that might be more information. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Right. I mean, does that mean, though, the possibility of the son becoming the successor cannot be ruled out instead of the daughter, Ju-ae or Un-ju?
We certainly cannot rule anything out. Again, don't forget, we didn't know that Kim Jong-un was going to be the next leader of North Korea until his father, the late Kim Jong-il, said so in September 2010. And that was years after South Korean media had been reporting the existence of 3 sons. So it certainly is possible. However, that being said, if there are multiple children, but only one of them is in the spotlight with her father, attending official functions, attending rocket launches and events like that, then that one probably is in the spotlight for a reason. She enjoys a special status. Maybe she has been selected by her father. But of course, plans can always change, can't they? In 10 years' time, Kim Jong-un might feel differently. He might anoint a different child as his successor. So don't forget that there was a time in North Korea when people thought that Kim Il-sung's brother might succeed him, but that didn't happen. And then people looked at Kim Jong-il's brother as a potential successor for him, and that also didn't happen. So we have to just watch and keep our minds open.
Right, it's never been easy to read what's on the North's mind. Now, the North's state-run newspaper, 노동신문, hasn't reported on Cuba since February 15th. That's the day after South Korea unveiled a surprise announcement of forging former diplomatic ties with Cuba. Isn't this rare for the North, and not to mention Cuba?
It's not rare that North Korea doesn't make a big public deal out of diplomatic disappointments. I can only speculate, but I would not be surprised if Pyongyang is disappointed that Cuba has normalized relations with Seoul. But also North Korea's, there's a lot of experience with this. Way back in, I think, 1989 or 1990, when Hungary was the first nation in the Soviet bloc to publicly normalize relations with South Korea, North Korea was furious, and some very angry words were said. And now Hungary and North Korea have normalized normalize their relations once again. So I think after 30 years of this kind of experience, North Korea is quite pragmatic and used to the idea that not only countries, but also the United Nations can recognize and have relations with both Koreas at the same time. And Cuba is also pragmatic because don't forget that right after the normalization of relations with South Korea, Cuba's President Miguel Diaz-Canel tweeted to affirm the historic relations and friendship and solidarity between Cuba and North Korea on the occasion of Kim Jong-il's 82nd birthday. So Cuba's certainly not finished in its relations with North Korea either.
Definitely. All right. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, Jaco. We appreciate it. You have a great day.
Thank you very much. You too.
Sweden has finally been given approval to join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. The Nordic nation will now discard 200 years of neutrality and expand NATO's presence on the Baltic Sea even further. Park Gun-woo has the details.
Sweden is set to become the 32nd member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization after the Hungarian Parliament made its final approval to accept Stockholm on Monday local time. Only 6 out of 194 voters in the parliament opposed Sweden's accession, removing the last remaining hurdle preventing NATO membership.
The parliaments of all NATO countries have now voted for Sweden to become a member of NATO, and it is, of course, a historic day we are witnessing.
The process has taken nearly 2 years since Sweden applied to join the Defense Alliance following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Now, all that is left is for Hungary's president to sign the approval and for Sweden to submit its instrument of accession with the United States government. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg called it a historic day, taking to social media to say, quote, "Sweden's membership will make us all stronger and safer."
But of course, what happens now is that they will be a full member they will be covered by Article 5, and they will also be part of decisions inside NATO.
Article 5 states that an attack on one member is considered an attack against all. Sweden's membership also means the country will discard 200 years of neutrality, while the strategically important Baltic Sea will now be almost completely surrounded, except for Russia, by NATO countries. Vladimir Putin also on Monday signed a decree that reestablishes the Soviet-era Moscow and Leningrad military districts effective March 1st. This was first proposed by Russia's defense minister Sergei Shoigu in 2022 in response to NATO's expansion. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
With Russia and Ukraine entering a third year of war, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said his military has only received 30% of the artillery shells promised by the EU. Meanwhile, Ukraine's defense ministry says some 410,000 Russian troops lost their lives since the invasion in February 2022. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Marking the second anniversary since the Russian invasion of Ukraine over the weekend, President Volodymyr Zelensky called for continued support from the West in order to push back ongoing Russian offensives. However, the Ukrainian president on Monday also said that his military had not received all of the support it was promised, including 1 million artillery shells promised by the EU. He says the Ukrainian military has only received 30% of the promised amount, with the EU noting that the production capacity of defense companies in each country has not been able to keep pace, while their own arsenals have been depleted. High Representative of the EU for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, recently admitted that the supply is being delayed, adding that 524,000 rounds would be delivered by the end of March. The prolonged war seems to have taken a toll on Ukraine as it struggles to defend against the Russian offensive. According to the Associated Press, the Ukrainian military once again withdrew its troops from Arirang following an attempt to take back the Eastern Front region. The strategically important town of Arirang was recently captured by the Russian army. The military spokesman said its troops had to retreat further as they could not overcome the vastly larger number of Russians. Meanwhile, the Russian military claimed that it had destroyed an M1 Abrams tank for the first time. The main battle tank was given to Ukraine by the U.S. and deployed to the front line last fall. And a day after President Zelensky announced the number of Ukrainian troops that have died in battle, Ukraine's defense ministry says 417,000 Russian troops were killed during the two-year war. It added that Russia lost many of its military vehicles, including 6,555 tanks, 12,478 combat armored vehicles, 25 battleships, 1 submarine, and 340 military aircraft. The latest Russian troops loss figure announced by Kyiv is higher than the number predicted by the West, where reports have put the number at around 300,000. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Thousands of firms from around the world are back in Barcelona to show off their state-of-the-art mobile and communications technology and services. Artificial intelligence once again takes the center stage. Our Moon Hae-ryun has more.
Europe's biggest mobile and telecommunications trade show is back. The 2024 edition of the Mobile World Congress, hosted in Barcelona every year, kicked off on Monday local time. The theme for this year's 4-day event is Future First, embodying 6 different sub-themes such as 5G and AI, and stretching beyond the mobile industry to digital transformation overall. Around 2,400 firms from 200 countries around the world are expected to showcase their products and services this year to 95,000 visitors. Among the firms unveiling their latest new technology is South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics, with its new Galaxy Ring that tracks health data in your sleep. While attendees at MWC are unable to actually try the units on display, the product is due to hit stores sometime later this year to join Samsung's lineup of wearable technology. Another reveal at MWC 2024 from domestic telecommunications firm KT is the intelligent urban air mobility traffic management system that assists in the safe operation of urban air mobility vehicles. UATM digitally replicates real-world UAM operations by integrating digital twin technology and AI, and enhances safety based on numerous data analyses and simulations. Meanwhile, China's participation in the event is also garnering attention, as its biggest companies, including Huawei and Xiaomi, did not participate at CES 2024 last month, amid growing competition in US-China technology sectors. With AI being a central theme this year, Xiaomi debuted global sales of its Xiaomi 14 smartphone, which integrates AI technology for searching photos, translation services, and taking meeting notes. Chinese technology firm Honor also launched an AI smartphone with an eye tracking feature that enables users to open apps simply by moving their eyes. And in true MWC spirit, 5 telecommunications firms from around the world, including South Korea's SK Telecom, signed a contract on the first day of the event to establish a joint venture developing AI technology. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Ji-young, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. We begin today in the United Arab Emirates, where the World Trade Organization's 13th Ministerial Conference opened in Abu Dhabi on Monday. The 4-day event is attended by ministers from most of the WTO's member countries. In Monday's opening session, the WTO accepted its first new members since 2016 as Comoros and Timor-Leste joined the group. The WTO now has 166 members in total. 8 members also accepted the fisheries subsidies agreement adopted in the previous ministerial conference, bringing the number of acceptees to 69. In the opening of the biannual meeting, WTO Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala said that war, uncertainty and instability are weighing down the global economy, and with almost half the world's population heading for elections this year, people everywhere are feeling anxious about the future, and this will be felt at the ballot box this year. She added that inflation in food, energy and other essentials will be fueling political frustration. In the US, the Federal Trade Commission and several states on Monday announced that they are suing to block retail supermarket chain Kroger's $24.6 billion deal to buy the smaller rival Albertsons. If completed, the Kroger-Albertsons deal would be the largest supermarket merger in the US history, creating a grocery empire with some 4,000 stores. The FTC said that the deal will eliminate fierce competition between Kroger and Albertsons, leading to higher prices for groceries and other essential household items for millions of Americans. The director of the FTC's Bureau of Competition, Henry Liu, said that Kroger's acquisition of Albertsons would further exacerbate the financial difficulties facing consumers. The FTC also said that Washington D.C. and 8 states, including California and Illinois, are joining the Commission's federal lawsuit. Kroger, meanwhile, argued that should the merger be blocked, retail giants such as Amazon and Walmart would become even more powerful and unaccountable. In the U.S., a member of the U.S. Air Force has died on Monday after setting himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy. 25-year-old Aaron Bushnell chose to self-immolate in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. on Sunday in protest against the war in Gaza. Secret Service members rushed to extinguish the flames, but Bushnell later died in hospital. According to The Times, Bushnell and his military fatigues broadcasted the incident live on the internet, saying that "I will no longer be complicit in genocide," before setting himself on fire and screaming "Free Palestine." Earlier in December, a woman also set fire to herself outside the Israeli consulate in Atlanta. In Taiwan, thousands of tourists and locals visited the Pingxi district of New Taipei on Saturday to celebrate the Lunar New Year Lantern Festival. The Taiwan Lantern Festival is an annual event where festival goers release lanterns inscribed with their wishes into the sky. It's hosted by the Tourism Bureau of the Ministry of Transportation and Communications and has become an international tourist attraction over the past few decades. With 2024 being the year of the dragon, Taiwan's Lantern Festival celebrated with a dragon theme.
Good morning. A few days of spring warmth we had this month might have spoiled us. It feels far chillier nowadays, despite temperatures hovering around the norms. While we are expecting a repeat of yesterday's weather in most places today, temperatures, in fact, stay in a similar range through Thursday. But rain on the last workday of the week will bring a big drop in readings to the country. For today, the east of Gangwon-do could see more snow flurries through the first half of the day. The mountainous regions on Jeju will see 1 to 3 more centimeters of snow. The rest of the country, meanwhile, will be under partly sunny skies. Morning temperatures are slightly higher than the same time yesterday, and highs will rise to a similar level to yesterday, topping out at 12 degrees over in Gwangju and Jeju Island this afternoon. Meanwhile, southern regions in Jeju will be quite windy all day today. Thursday's rain will bring freezing temperatures to central regions. It will be colder on Saturday morning. It looks to be a rainy one for the east of Gangwon-do and southern regions early next week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Wednesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, who's calling? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
시장입니다. 하나 스탠바이. 방콕 스타트.
웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
한국에 오면 먹어야죠.
먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation. Making news just for you. It's February 27th here in Seoul. I'm Shin Yeun, and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Park Ki-hoon.
Thanks for having me.
And Chiji.
Good morning.
All right, now both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Scientists have revealed a new complete fossil that's 5 meters in length and has long been considered to resemble a dragon for its extremely long neck. The creature dates back 240 million years back to the Triassic period. It's called the Dinocephalosaurus orientalis, a long aquatic reptile whose fossils were found mostly in southern China. This is the first time researchers assembled all of the prehistoric beast parts together. Moving on, to tackle rising food prices, a handful of universities have been giving out breakfast to their college students at only 75 cents per meal. This year, 43 more universities have decided to participate, expanding the total number of schools who provide this type of service to 186. The policy aims to feed more university students an affordable breakfast while also encouraging more people to eat rice. Lastly, South Korea has entered its second week since doctors have gone on a nationwide strike against the government's decision to expand med school admission slots from next year. Around 10,000 doctors have handed in their resignations since. Trainee doctors have not shown up to work. What's adding on to the medical catastrophe is some 12,600 medical school students handing in their leave of absence forms as well. The Education Ministry said, easily put, 2 out of 3 med school students in the country have done so, and most schools have sided with their students postponing the start of med school student semesters from February to March, but there are also some schools that haven't processed these students' leave of absence requests. Now, in this case, students may fail the whole semester given that they would be considered absent from their lectures, and because of this, around 400 med school students have retracted their leave of absence requests, and we're seeing this headline develop day by day. Now, here in the studio, what do you think about this ongoing medical crisis? We're seeing a shortage of doctors in places. We've even seen some 80-year-old patients die on the bed without a doctor there to train them. What do you think about this, and where would you like to see this go?
Well, I've mentioned this earlier in our previous episode, but this collective action by doctors is unique to our country because other developed countries, in fact, they're trying to increase the number of doctors in line with the increasing number of the elderly citizens in each country. And I still believe that doctors shouldn't base their actions on their individual financial reasons only. In fact, they're at the front line and they're supposed to be the ones who understand the issue of doctor shortages the best. And also, like you mentioned, the worst problem is that this protest is negatively affecting all the patients out there because we're seeing delays in surgeries as well as hospitalizations and also cancellations of appointments. And however, I've also read this article that some medical trainees are actually secretly attending their workplace to just help out with the doctors who are still there and to take care of the patients.
Exactly. Once again, I would like to emphasize on our episode that it's not all of the doctors that have handed in their resignations or not all med school students who've handed in a absence of leave form. We are seeing still a minority of them there. Now, here in the studio, Kyun, what do you think about this headline?
I think doctors in Korea are showing what it would really be like when there's a shortage of doctors in hospitals by going on a big strike like this. This is a tricky situation, and I think the main question is today more important than today 10 years later? I don't think there's an absolute answer to this. Obviously, for doctors, their jobs, high salary could be on the line, but it's also their pride, effort, and sense of duty, treating patients that should not be ignored. I think the government is thinking ahead of the current demographics of our country, and I think they're heading in the right direction, but at the same time, they should come up with better ways to communicate with the medical staff to make steady changes to that actually benefits and satisfies both parties moving forward.
Exactly. Like most things, I think all conflict needs effective communication. Now, we're going to switch gears to our main discussion of the day now. We're living amid high inflation and soaring living costs. Up till a few years ago, this discouraged many millennials and Gen Z from trying to even save up. That's why we had terms like like YOLO, you only live once, pop up. But as these economic difficulties continue to last, we're seeing much more conservative spending patterns. So we're going to start our discussion from here. Do you guys think it's true that our generation is saving up much more compared to the past or our previous generations due to prolonged inflation and soaring living costs?
Yes, yes, yes. People in their 20s and 30s are spending much less than before, including myself. I think our consumption behavior has changed from the COVID-19 lockdown period. Back then, many youngsters, including myself, were feeling very frustrated staying at home and wanted to compensate and pamper ourselves by so-called flexing, spending our money on luxury goods, traveling abroad, dining in at fancy, expensive restaurants, and so on. However, as we get towards the endemic, high inflation and continuous rate hikes took its toll and eventually made us close our wallets. So to give our viewers a better understanding of how much we don't spend compared to other age groups, let's take a look at the screen. As you can see from the bar graph, people in their 20s spent much less than those in their 60s in accordance with the rise in interest rates, almost a tenfold. The figures show annual drop in consumption for every 1% increase in benchmark interest rate. Now, these numbers clearly show that our generation is affected the most with the economic downturn. Also, with the ongoing war in Ukraine and in the Middle East as well, we are living in a world of uncertainty and exposed to volatility of commodity prices. So it only seems natural for us to, I guess, spend less and try to find ways of saving up more by changing our spending patterns on a daily basis.
So it's quite interesting. In the past, because of this volatility and instability, we try to use as much money as we can, thinking even though we save up, we can't buy a house, we can't get married or have a kid. But nowadays, I think our generation has taken a shift and we're now trying to save up more.
That's right.
Why so?
Well, it's especially so for those who have taken out large sums of loans, large loans to purchase a house during the pandemic, which was a common practice among especially the young people here in the country, and we called it the 영끌족, or really devoting your whole soul literally to get a house.
Sucking your whole soul out just for that.
Exactly. So rising interest rates have put a very big strain on all of these people who have taken out the loans, and so as a result, many individuals are choosing to save up and use less money, cut back on their spending really. And when millennials and Gen Zs first entered the workforce, in fact, the country was seeing low growth in the economy, which is why it's really challenging to earn money, and at the same time, prices have soared and it's really expensive to eat out or buy anything really. And this has led to the culture of young people really saving as much as possible, even engaging in communities where people would save up together and share their own stories of their everyday lives, saving up, trying to live off just the minimum amount of money that they have. And this trend of frugality has actually become even more common and has expanded among the younger generation.
Exactly, and as common as it's becoming, I would now like to take a look at how exactly we're trying to save up and spend less.
To give you some examples, young people using less delivery apps and not being able to go to the hospital even when they're sick. So food delivery market has been a growing sector over many years, but it experienced its first ever negative turnover last year with a drop of 0.6% according to Statistics Korea. This is obviously due to the rise in food prices and delivery fees. People in their 20s and 30s were the main users and consumers of these apps, and statistics show a falling trend of the total amount spent on this online platform. Another change in consumer behavior we're seeing in young people is that they're reluctant to go to hospitals. So from a report released by National Youth Policy Institute, 4 out of 10 youths said they couldn't go to the hospital over the past year because they were either busy with work or just thought it was a bit of a waste of money to go to the hospital. They were avoiding regular checkups as well due to the high cost and relied on over-the-counter medicines when they felt sick. So the two ways I mentioned are only the tip of the iceberg, but it is definitely a worrying sign for young people just like us, as we have so much to look forward to in our lives. But except like right now, it seems very bleak, but I'm sure there will be another rebound and we'll see better days.
Fingers crossed. So canceling out our subscription or like erasing delivery apps on my phone. I did that too, but it didn't last for too long. And then also not going to the hospital. Are there any other things that sort of show how we try to save up our money?
Well, other than the ones that Ki-hoon just introduced, the younger generation is really shifting away from engaging in expensive leisure and sports activities that we once used to enjoy a lot. For instance, things like omakase or expensive sports such as golf, which used to be popular among younger people, are slowly losing their appeal. And even the sales of golf wares have dropped among the younger generation as well. Instead, they prefer small luxury goods. They're not giving up on the luxury, though, I guess, but it's just become a lot smaller for extravagant ones, which they can enjoy without having to spend too much money. For example, popular options would be like small wallets or like perfumes, things like that.
I would like to agree. I think our generation, we didn't give up on going for the luxury items, but I think it also has to do with investment. I'm not really sure about perfume. Maybe that's because you give like instant pleasure. You really spend your money and you feel like that scent goes with you for a very long time now. But I think luxury items can work as an investment tactic, which can add on to our very frugal spending habits. Now, we asked our viewers if their consumer habits changed amid high living costs and food prices as well. If you take a look at the screen, you can find out what 3 of them had to share with us. Let's start with Rex. Rex said, by making a list, I've learned to prioritize what I need to buy first and avoid impulse buying. Planning out my schedule in advance also helps in saving not only time, but money. James said, I've heard that the Japanese budgeting method of using a kaikeibo journal has gained popularity in recent years. Many said new spending habits for me may be only relying on buying a lot of goods online because of the free shipping fees, and it may vary when they can buy a lot. Now, I can tell that all of our viewers are also trying to jump onto this frugal spending trend. Then why do you guys think we're seeing such patterns, especially among millennials and Gen Z these days?
Right, so we are known as the thumb generation.
We are.
And it's become a common thing to share like our everyday lives on social media. So while things, come and go very fast, a new trend that we're experiencing right now among the younger generation is sharing our daily consumption habits and encouraging each other to become wiser spenders. So, like you mentioned before, it's become almost impossible to own our own houses, let alone get married and, raise children. So I think many young people, including myself, have turned our eyes on finding ways to keep us happy and motivated by focusing more on small things, like small luxury goods that doesn't cost too much money like on a daily basis. So I think things change, but I'm sure, like I said before, there will be a bright future.
Exactly, and we've been talking about this a few times on News Generation. I don't know if all of our viewers remember, but there was a time when we talked about how we're spending so much because we feel like we can't save up. And then there were times when we would go into these beggar rooms on Kakao Talk or chatting applications where we would save up even $1 for just a basic drink. So we can see these consumption trends go on, like coming back and forth. But why do you think right now, as of now, millennials and Gen Z are trying to become more stingent?
Well, for one reason, unlike the older generation, the younger generation, they have limited capital. And like I said, it's really difficult to earn money, as well as we're facing surge in prices. And the economy hasn't grown much since the millennials and Gen Zs entered the workforce. And as a result, their spending patterns are significantly impacted by external factors such as the rise in interest rates and prices as well. And so they've started to really shift away from that YOLO mindset. And they're also very concerned about their life after retirement because the government is facing pension issues and they're unsure. It can't be guaranteed that the government will provide sufficient pensions for our generation when we become old and we retire. So we've talked about this in another episode before too, like how we already prepare for retirement. And that's why the younger generation is trying to save up and make sure that they can prepare for then.
I see. We're becoming more smart consumers and investors. And I don't know about you guys, but I think my consumption pattern really changes based on what I see on the news and also word of mouth with what my friends are doing. Sometimes sometimes they say I'm using a lot. I'm like, oh, what are you spending on? And I go to leisure activities with them. But whenever I have a really good friend that really saves up, it helps me because it makes me look back and reflect on my own investment patterns. And that's what we're going to be doing right now. We're going to be including a very smart consumer and investor who's a fellow Gen Z in our talks. Stay tuned for our live interview. We're now going to talk to a fellow Gen Z who's known among her friends to have frugal habits. It's Chun Se-min living in Seoul. Welcome, Se-min.
Hello.
All right, Se-min, so how did you earn your reputation as the friend who spends less and saves more? I think that's a great quality you have. Can you tell us how exactly you save up?
To begin with, for day-to-day habits, I try to eat at home and cook as much as I can. Eating out and delivering food has become more expensive, so preparing a packed lunch or bringing homemade coffee can save me a lot of money. I also try to save money by refraining from non-necessary expenditures, such as shopping for things that I already have. If I do have to buy something, I lean towards more durable goods that will last longer. I wait for the discount event and buy the goods only when it is on sale. And in regards to a long-term plan, I do have a separate bank account for my savings every month. I save at least around 20 to 30% of my income before I spend it. I always try to keep an eye out for banks that offer higher interest rates on savings accounts and deposit my money there. I additionally signed up for a housing subscription savings account. This will allow me to become eligible for a new apartment if I deposit enough money into the account and maintain it for a certain period of time.
Well, I I need a friend just like you.
I know.
The next question is, what made you decide to save up more and spend less?
Living in the city has become increasingly costly, from eating out to occasionally taking the taxi. Inflation has even affected everyday grocery shopping, so I am definitely thinking twice when I reach for the seasonal fruits at the mart. But most importantly, I think expensive housing is the core problem. Having to pay expensive monthly rent is a big burden for young people living in the city, especially when the job market now is very unstable and difficult. Paying rent takes out a great portion of my income, and after that, there really is not enough to spend. Due to these circumstances, I have to constantly remind myself to save in order to prepare for future expenditures such as my education and for possible medical bills.
I see. Well, are there any tips that you'd like to share with us as to how you save up so well?
I've learned from personal experience that if I am extra conscious and careful each and every time I pull up my credit card, I am able to spend less and save more. The question I ask myself is, do I really need this? I try to be more of an ethical consumer online and offline these days, reminding myself of the environmental impact of my shopping choices. So my advice to viewers would be to do the same, to give more thought every day before making the choice of consuming too many material goods. So turning to alternatives such as buying vintage clothing would be an example in this aspect.
I see. Thank you so much, Se-min. While I was hearing your interview, I kept reflecting back on my own spending patterns, and it's much more easier said than done, but to see you take it into action is really inspirational. Thank you so much. It was a great, helpful interview today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I would like to end our discussion by sharing our own know-how, I guess, on what's the wisest and smartest way to save our money during these economically straining times. And I'd like to start by saying, for me, what I try to do, though I'm not the best at it, is I try to journal myself, my expenditures. It's really difficult, though. And a lot of my friends say I should use like my smartphone apps, but the only reason why I don't do that is I'm sort of penalizing myself every single time I use too much by handwriting it down.
Okay.
And actually, it's really nice because if you go analog, you can really see how much you spend and reflect each and every time based on when you write down
So I
the
have a
figures.
quick question.
Yeah.
Are you spending more than you're earning right now, or
That is
the
a
opposite?
secret, but I think you might know the answer.
Minus.
It's minus all the time,
Minus all the
which is why I'm penalizing myself. But what about you? What's the smart way for you to do?
Right. I think I agree with many of the things that Semin just mentioned. But the economy will take some time to fully recover from the pre-pandemic situation. So I think thinking a little more ahead by listing your income, like just what you said, and your expenses, and finding places where you can actually reduce more or even take out can really help you alleviate the stress you receive from soaring living costs. Things won't change immediately, so no matter how much you stress over it, it's not going to change right now. So I think continuing to work hard and learning to appreciate the things you have rather than the things you don't have or things you want could be another good method. And I think also looking for simple, healthy activities that doesn't require much money, or actually none, to be honest, like going for a walk, reading, or even writing a journal. That's what I do, and it's helped me a lot to really think less about all the stresses that come with having not enough money at the moment. But I think just be wise, be a wise consumer, and like people like Semin, I think she's heading in the right track, and
she
you should really learn from her as well.
She really put the nail in the bud, and I think it's because she did a lot of research as well. And as you mentioned, Kyun, there's so many free options out there for you to enjoy your leisure time. Make sure to do enough research. I think that's another key thing. What about you, Jihi? Any tips?
Well, I really like the tip that Semin gave us to think twice before you buy something. If you really need it, you should buy it. But if you have it already, then it's a waste to buy it again, right? And personally, while it's important to be organized with your earnings and spending, I think being unconditionally frugal can really limit your life experiences. You can't really enjoy life, and it can also negatively impact the economy because we need consumption for the economy to keep running. So it's not recommended to overspend beyond your means, of course, but it's best to spend within your budget to really be able to enjoy your life without putting too much pressure on yourself to save up all the time.
Finding that balance seems to be difficult, but at the end of the day, maybe having like short-term goals could be helpful. For instance, as you mentioned, if you want to do a leisure activity that might cost you a lot, maybe have that goal and try to save up within 1 or 2 weeks. You can feel satisfaction right after. Now, hopefully, today's discussion really facilitated for you to have better consuming habits. In the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Park Ki-hoon.
It's always a pleasure.
And Chiji.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
Welcome. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?